So when you're focusing on the structuring of the piece and when you're trying to make it come together, I would suggest that you go back to how you research the topic. You type in the main thing, and then you click on a link, and then that link leads to the next one, which leads to the next one, which leads to the next one. And as you go on, they get more in depth and more detailed. But you started out with a very general search question or search topic. And I think that's how you need to structure the piece. You need to start with the generalities and then go into what's more in depth of the piece, like what's happening, the inner workings of the topic.
The way I decided how to structure the piece was, what's the problem, why is it a big deal, and how do we fix it?
Structuring was definitely a huge challenge with this because mental health is such a complicated issue. And I think that's something that you will run into a lot with this competition, because if it's a relevant issue, it probably is complicated, because if it's not complicated, then we probably would have fixed it already and there wouldn't be a need for you to make a documentary about it. In terms of structure, I think it all starts with your planning. When you're shooting, go out and get as widespread and as much as possible. So that way, when you come into editing, you have a lot of stuff to work with. And honestly, I think the best way is just to pull up your editing timeline and just start throwing stuff in there and see what sticks. Don't necessarily stick with the first structure you come up with. Throw stuff out there and play around a little bit. And I think once I've just really thrown almost every possible usable bit into my timeline, then I might step away from it and create a very vague outline because I know what I have that's usable and what's good, and then order it from there. One of the things I would actually not recommend doing is to cut at the beginning for the 5 to 7 minute time limit that they have. So just throw everything up there that's usable and just get it how you want it first, and then worry about time. Because if you just immediately start cutting for time, you might lose something good. So I would recommend have a pretty good idea of where your piece is gonna be and then start cutting for the time limit.
I'm also in the screenwriting class at my high school, and the process that I use in that class for screenwriting, the process that they teach us, I applied that same method to working on the C-SPAN piece, even though it's not a fictional piece. And I'm a very visual person, and so it really helped me to have like index cards, and I would sketch out a scene that I wanted to film, and I'd take that, and then I'd take another card, and I'd write down a rough script of what I would want to say. As I kept researching and coming across points that I knew I wanted to make in my piece, I kept creating new scenes and thinking of, okay, how can I relay this information creatively in an interesting way and still make the story make sense? And so I would come up with scene cards and I'd put them all in order and I'd look at it and I'd think about the pacing as if I was watching a fictional piece. And so I'd think, okay, I need to get all the exposition across in the beginning, explain what the national debt is, and then if there's too much, I'd be like, okay, this part is too long, I need to cut it out. So I really just looked at it as if it were a fictional piece. Because I still don't know too much about politics, obviously this process has helped me a lot, but because I don't know too much about it, it was easy for me to look at it through the eyes of someone who knows nothing going into it. And so I would just look at it, okay, if you don't know anything about this, will this make sense? And so I just use that to help me decide what to keep, what to cut. I think that's reflected pretty well in the finished product, just because you see a very fluid story, I think, from start to finish, and that all came from the screenwriting process.
When I was structuring my piece, I knew I needed to put something in that caught their attention right off the bat. I thought, oh, I could put a bunch of clips of news stories, but then I was like, well, who else is gonna do that? Probably everyone. So as I was looking through my different interviews, one of my interviews was talking about a very dramatic story about what happened to her and her experience and how it changed her viewpoint on this topic. I knew that would catch their attention right off the bat, and that's what I started with.
When I am trying to come up with a way to structure my documentaries, I always want to pull the viewer into the story. I think that starting with the stand-up paddle bit really helped to draw the viewer into the story, because it wasn't just straight facts, it was actually like visually appealing. It wasn't like a whole lot of information, and it was a personal story